I have got a contract with Eurostar.
Right.
I run out same-day deliveries. I've got a van on the way back from Brussels at the moment on a same day. Where I have the trains with supplies.
Right.
So he was sent out at the early hours of the morning, out to Brussels, reload Brussels, back to London. I go out to Paris, I tip Paris, reload Paris, back to London. Twice, 2-3 times a week I do it. No customs checks. All I have to do is run out the goods on what's called a CMR form, which is an international delivery note.
Right.
If we go outside the customs union in any sense of the imagination, we will need to do what's called transit documents. They cost 75 to 90 quid a pop. You have to go to Customs House in Dover to clear them. You have to park up. If you get sent down what is called a Route 1, which I've had before, you're stuck there for 6 to 7 hours waiting to clear them. On a good day, you can be in and out in 45, 50 minutes. And Customs House...
But how many vehicles potentially would have to do that if we were outside the customs union?
All of them.
And all of them would take 45 to 50 minutes?
Well, that's on a quiet day if you're going in at 9.
No, this is scary, mate, because look, I've laid out what I thought I understood, and then I admitted I know nothing. You live and work and depend upon this free movement of goods completely. You do it every single day, often several times a day, and if I've understood you correctly so far, you're saying it's even worse than you thought, James.
I've said all along a vote to leave would be a vote to leave the customs union, which scared me, and I knew it would possibly be the beginning of the end for express van transport in this country. The just-in-time supply chain is already suffering. A massive Polish company has already gone bust in Poland because of the drop in just-in-time movements of goods in the vehicle automotive industry.
Why would that have happened already, though, Kieran?
Well, no, because what they do, they have set budgets.
Right.
Like, all the car plants have set budgets on what they want to spend every year to get their overnight stuff. You want a pallet of air filters from France going to Luton. You pick it up at 4 o'clock in the evening, it's at the doorstep in Luton at 8 o'clock the next morning.
And if it isn't, then whatever you're building in Luton doesn't get built, and everything gets...
Well, the production line stops. And
this will be true in Sunderland. This will be true in all. I mean, I saw a just-in-time explanation of what goes on at the Nissan plant in Sunderland, and the margins are like minutes, aren't they? You lose a minute somewhere, and it could actually stop a conveyor belt halfway around the factory.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. I picked up an urgent job out of Stuttgart, and I had to give them updates every hour where I was. It was going to the Dagenham Ford engine plant, where they only build engines now, because it had stopped. I'd literally done a same-day delivery from Stuttgart to Dagenham non-stop.
When the referendum happened and the result came through, what did you think would be in place by now, 2 years later? Because this is, if I've understood you correctly, your livelihood's under threat, right, as we speak.
Do you know what, James?
Go on.
When that vote came in, I cried.
Oh, God.
Right? I knew that everything I'd built up over the last 15 years of doing this job was going to be finished. We are, whether you like it or not, we are a foreign-owned production line in this country, where we are owned by outside interests, and we put things together. We are not like Germany, where we own BMW, where we own Audi, we own VW. We got BMW Mini in Oxford, Sunderland, Swindon, Honda. They're all foreign-owned, and they're all here because they've got access to the single market, and they've got the freedom of movement of goods where you do not need transit documents and you do not need carnets. And I'll give you another example.
Yeah, please do.
Exhibitions, goods and services going to exhibitions. If you go to Norway or Switzerland and you've got 100 grand's worth of exhibition stuff in the back of your van, you've got to pay 25% up front before it even goes into the country. Right?
Yeah.
That will put people out of business overnight.
Of course it will.
We've had to do it.
Why? This isn't your field of expertise. It's ostensibly mine. But does it baffle you that the coverage is so low and so confused, because it's clear to you what's going on. You hear politicians, and obviously some of them on this radio station, saying stuff about the customs union that's palpably absurd. They're going unchallenged, not really because of bias, but because of ignorance. This is your field of knowledge. This is literally your specialist subject.
I'll tell you what I've been doing, James.
Go on.
I've been calling out the liars on Twitter.
Yeah.
Hurry, goes out to Switzerland for an hour, stands at a border and says it's frictionless.
Yeah.
You'll believe it. I put 1 million pictures on there. I put a picture of a transit document, a carnet, and a CMR form. I said, list me what those forms do, how you fill them out, and what they cost. Didn't get a reply.
Who was that?
Right. There was Kate Hurry.
Yeah.
She's standing at a border crossing. She got she went into
I think Daniel Hannan's taken a picture of himself somewhere as well and said it's all really easy.
I called him out as well. I called him out and called him a liar. I've got actual pictures on my phone of going through the Swiss border in Basel and coming out at Lake Como. And I tell you now, it's far from frictionless. When you go in, I tell you what, the Swiss border closes at 5 o'clock on a Friday evening and reopens at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning.
Good grief.
You can't enter with commercial goods.
Yeah, for people, I don't want people to get confused. It's in Schengen, so if you're on your holidays, you can cross over to your heart's content. But if you're
yes, you can. As long as you get your vignette,
yeah,
you can cross. But you still have to drive down a motorway that will end and drive underneath a big customs plaza with the police standing there, and you've still got a chance of getting stopped.
Yeah.
Unless your goods are running on what is called a carnet, right, which is a passport for your goods. If they go from multiple place to place, they cost £650 to compile. I've done one.
Yeah.
I've done one to Norway. 650 quid. I had to go and pick it up from the Department of Trade in London. And it took them a week to put together. And my customer said, we're never going to Norway to do an exhibition again.
I don't know if I should do this, but why I'm late for the news. You've blown the story wide open. Anyone who's doubting it, first of all, saying it's all my fault for making these predictions, and then I point out it's actually the government. You do. Here's one genius saying, oh yeah, you've got your mate to phone in. Nice one. This desperation people have to believe that the unicorns are coming. It's quite incredible, because this is you run a haulage company. You're not some Remainer academic or some metropolitan. You're a blinking van driver who's built up a business, and now you're about to see it go down the toilet because of Brexit.
Well, I am, and I tell you what, I need another van because my work's actually expanded, but I'm scared to buy one.
Because
Steve, I'll be left with a van that I've got to pay finance on, and they're not cheap, and I might lose my contract. So what do I do?
I was in the US and Canada with the International Trade Committee the week before last.
Yes.
And it was interesting. I examined Greg Hans, who's the trade minister in our committee yesterday, and one of the things that I was pointing out was that some of the numerical assumptions that people have been making about effectively, they've been saying how little benefit there will be to the UK economy of potentially doing trade deals around the rest of the world, just don't really stack up when you look at the numbers behind them.
But they have to be better than what we've currently got, don't they?
Well, look, it's
No, I won't look. They just do, because in order to persuade people to do something, you have to persuade them that they'll end up in a better place than where they started. And you don't need me to remind you that Donald Trump's just announced a trade war.
Well, my position has always been that net things in the medium term would be effectively around the same as where they are now. You know,
what about in the short term?
Some things will be a bit less than they were before, and other things will be more.
Would it be unfair of me to ask? Hang on a minute. Can you refer me in any way to pre-referendum pronouncements when you said things will be worse than they were before in some areas?
So when I made a speech in the House of Commons before the vote, I was very careful to set out the net effects. There were some positives and some negatives.
But these would be economic impact assessments, wouldn't they? So where are things going to be worse?
Actually, economics. A lot of it wasn't economics.
Well, we're talking. Listen, I don't want this to get fractious because I am short of time. But I'm looking for reasons to be cheerful, and saying that we can do more trade with a country that's just announced a trade war is. It's low on my dial of cheerfulness.
For example, the Aussies, when they did their free trade agreement with the US, they vastly underestimated what that would be worth to them. They've actually seen their trade increase by 50%.
But you lead me again to the question of how that is going to be better than what we've currently got. I mean, we can talk over each other until the cows come home, but
it'll make up for any extra costs of what we do with the EU.
You do know that Australia is on the other side of the world and the European Union has a land border with the United Kingdom.
It's also a long way from the US.
Yes, it is, but we're not the US, and the US was never in the largest single market in the world, and we're leaving it, you say, to benefit from being able to trade with Australia while diminishing our ability to trade with Germany.
So just to give an example, the 0.2%, which the Treasury has said is what the potential value of doing a deal with the US might be, is about £5 billion.
Yes, and in the context of the European Union?
Well,
your own government's impact assessment. Your own government's impact. Oh, okay.
The insurance market in the US writes over $1 trillion of business every year. That's just one sector.
That's because they don't have a health service.
There is huge opportunity.
That's because they don't have a health service.
Well, health is actually a pretty small proportion of that. There's a lot more in the property.
So, okay. I'm grateful for the call. If I was to annotate what you've told me, and I am insisting that you obey the same rules as everybody else who rings the programme, reasons to be cheerful. You've given me Australia's trade deal with America being a bit better than they expected, or even a lot better than they expected. I don't want to put that words in your mouth. That's what you've got, Marcus Fish, MP for Yeovil.
One example, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Have a great day. What do you do now? Elected members of Parliament, look, we're walking away. Both sides now concede. His own Prime Minister concedes it's going to do us economic damage. Where are the pluses? Well, America signed a trade deal with Australia and it's gone a bit better than some people predicted.
I recently went self-employed a couple of years ago. So it was a big thing voting Brexit because I was building my business with client base, etc. But I think it's all going to be short-term.
What business are you in, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm a self-employed electrician. Although we're getting bigger and bigger as the weeks go by. But you know, I just
what's going to be short-term, Ash Lee?
Personal loss, personal financial loss.
Oh, but they did. To be fair, before the vote, they did tell you there wouldn't be any.
Well, I think. I was never naive to the fact that there would be. I mean, I believe there would be, and I was willing to take that sacrifice just for the independence and the just so we control our own laws. I mean,
you know what I do now, don't you?
What's that?
I ask you which law it is you're really looking forward to not having to obey anymore.
Any.
No, that's right. Any. Yeah, any.
Yeah, any.
So give me one.
The shape of your bananas.
It's not funny, is it?
It's
because
not.
The pound's at the lowest it's been since 1985, and you just said any law, and I'm just asking you to name one. We both know that bananas was a lie made up by Boris Johnson. Remind me which side he was on during the Leave campaign.
Well, he was up for himself, but that's not.
So what is the law, Ashley? Because you didn't vote. You knew you were going to take short-term economic damage. You knew that all your customers would do as a newly formed electrician company. Every single customer in the country potentially is going to be worse off than they were before the vote. So I'm just wondering what those laws are that you won't have to obey anymore that made you vote for this short-term economic hit.
Well, it wasn't the laws which was the main reason.
It was just the main reason you gave me, wasn't it, a minute ago?
Yeah, sorry. There's many.
Can you name one yet?
I wouldn't be able to. No.
So you voted so that you wouldn't have to obey these EU laws that you can't name.
No. It's more than that.
Well, go on then.
I mean, well, you watch Brussels. You go to Brussels. You watch the guys talking. It's all very. It's very political, and I mean, they're throwing their toys out the pram because the British people chose to leave. And it's like baking a cake, taking it into work, and someone says they don't want a slice, and you get all uppity about it. I mean, it's. We're
trying to examine why you voted the way you voted, because you now accept that it's going to cost you money. You hope in the short term. I hate to break it to you, but we're not even going to be close to signing deals for years. So that uncertainty that's affecting your balance book, your order book, is going to continue indefinitely. And then I ask you why you did it then, why you accepted that hit to your own pocket, and you say, well, because of all those laws that you can't name. And then when I ask you what the real reason is, you say because the EU is really political.
No. Well, I mean, well,
at what point, in this mirror that I'm holding up and that you're looking at what point are you going to recognise what you're seeing in the reflection? You're seeing a man who hasn't got an argument.
Well, I believe the argument is there's multiple arguments. There's
Go on, then.
Immigration, there's controlled immigration. But again, it's not about I'm not xenophobic. I'm not totally multicultural. I've got a family who live in America, in Bermuda, in Spain, and
all immigrants.
Immigrants are fine. There's nothing wrong. They're the same as me and you, looking for the best future for their family. But it's not about that. It's about the control. It's about our Prime Minister not having to succumb to the EU saying that he can or she can't do anything. I mean, it's the fact that and
that's fine. I've got no beef with you. If immigration's all you've got, then you're the cliche. You're the walking cliche. But what's interesting, Ashley, and I hope you won't take this the wrong way, what's interesting is that you spend 5 minutes pretending that you've got proper political arguments or economic understanding, and then as all of those claims fall away, you're just left with foreigners.
No, definitely not.
How has immigration damaged your life, would you say, in its current form?
Well, obviously, being a trade, immigration has pulled prices.
No, not for electricians. There's scant evidence that for completely unskilled labour, it might have subjected some wage compression in the care home industry and maybe unskilled labour on working sites. But there's actually a shortage of qualified electricians in this country, which is probably why you've gone self-employed. So it's not that, is it?
Yeah, plasterers, plumbers, electricians.
Yeah, but you're an electrician. I'm asking, all skilled labour is actually at a shortage at the moment. That's one of the reasons we can't build as many houses as we need to. So just in terms of Ashley and Pinner and the damage that uncontrolled mass immigration has done to your life, just give me the headlines.
Walking through the city centre and seeing mobs of immigrants not willing to integrate.
Walking through the centre of Pinner and seeing mobs of immigrants not willing to integrate.
Plymouth, down by Cornwall, Plymouth.
Okay.
Not Pinner, but yeah, I mean.
And how do you think leaving the European Union is going to disperse those mobs, Ashley?
I think we'll have more control over how.
But they're already here, mate.
Yeah, but we'll have more control to
No, they're here. So those mobs that upset you so much as you walk through town and see these mobs of immigrants refusing to integrate, now that we're going to leave the European Union, what's going to happen to the mobs?
I believe that we can integrate them because we have the choice and we have the authority to do what we like without.
So when we've passed it, so you've cast your vote because you don't want these people here in the numbers that they're here in, but you think that by doing that you're going to make them more amenable to integration and friendliness. So you deliver a message to someone saying we don't like you, and you think that makes them more likely to be your friend.
It's not about liking anyone.
Well, you don't like the mobs in the middle of town, do you?
No, and that goes with mobs of Englishmen as well. It doesn't matter on race. It doesn't matter.
So it's got nothing to do with immigration then. It's just mobs you don't like.
Yeah, just don't like mobs.
And bananas.
Yeah.
And all those laws that you can't name.
Bananas. Yeah.
Let's just finish with a quick question. When you said it's going to be a short-term economic hit, how long is short-term?
I think it's going to be under 5 years. It's just like starting a new business.
Every single one of your customers is going to be worse off than they needed to be for half a decade, and you're happy with that?
I'm happy, yeah. I'm happy with that.
All right, mate. Let's not fall out. And I hope the business goes, I really do. I hope it booms, even though you voted to have fewer customers and less money in the pockets of the ones you've already got.
I actually think in order to negotiate the issue...
Who's that shouting in the background?
It's my mum.
Okay.
Do apologise.
That's all right. It kind of goes with the territory for people who call themselves Brexiteers, doesn't it?
Yes. So basically, in order to negotiate with those people who want a second referendum, why don't we make it more democratic by introducing a PR election at the same time?
Right, yes. So we change our
our
entire electoral system by the end of March.
Well, it's not going to happen, but, it's...
What do you think you won, Robert?
What I would like is...
What do you think you won?
What I want is basically our whole governance, or the way that the wealth controls our country.
No. So what do you think? What do you think you won?
Well, I'm just about to explain that. I want...
no, not want. Won. W-O-N. What do you think you won?
A slap in the government's face to show them that they...
that government's gone. So what did you win?
Well, that government is a reform of the continuous politicians that are put forward instead of actually giving people and...
Let's have one more go. Take a little pause and tell me what you think you won.
What I won?
Yeah.
I won a vote to leave the EU.
No, I know that bit, but what did you win? What was the prize?
To actually undress our politicians, if that's a better way to actually put it. Because
it's even worse, incredibly. You almost deserve credit for that. So what you won to undress our politicians. And who's going to be in charge of Brexit?
Well, the way that they're dealing with Brexit is not something I agree with, because quite frankly, I would be negotiating.
But now we're back to silly rhetoric, aren't we? And ludicrous claims.
Well, no,
in terms of measurable, tangible benefits, what did you win?
What did I win? I won a deregulated country.
What does that mean?
Can deregulate itself. Well, it means that we can strip away from the EU laws that we don't like.
For example?
And, well, for me, one of the ones is the plug system.
Pardon?
I know it's not very hugely, but we obviously use free-pin plugs in this country.
Yes.
The EU don't. And so basically it means that our safety aspects are a lot stronger than the generalisation of the EU.
But we're in the EU.
So rather than going... Pardon?
We're in the EU. So you think we have to leave the EU to get 3-pin plugs?
No, it's about going back to some of the things where we are stronger at.
Yeah, go on. Talk me through the plugs thing. So what can we do now with plugs that we can't do as members?
As well, we can still do it, but the manufacturers
So what
this
did you win then?
Compliancy to British law.
Compliancy to British law?
Yes.
Right.
So when you bring something into this country, it has to comply to the UK.
That's what happens already. That's why we've got 3-pin plugs, you see, and they haven't.
No, because they use plastic rather than metal.
The EU sets the base level above which we are all free to go, as the fact that we have gone proves. Mate, just pause for a minute and think about what you've just done. You've come live on national radio.
Yeah.
You've described yourself as a Brexiteer. You're getting told off by your mum in the background. And when I've asked you what you think you've won, you've said the right to have 3-pin plugs that we already have.
It's also...
And it's 10:30 on Monday morning, mate. Simon Conway has the headlines. I think he should introduce himself.
My name's Dominic Raab, and I'm a Tory. I don't support the Human Rights Act, and I don't believe in economic and social rights.
Yeah, down with economic and social rights. If you didn't have any economic and social rights, what would happen to disabled and sick people?
With the work capability assessment, Napier University and Heriot Watt just released evidence about how it causes almost universal permanent mental health damage. It kills people. I have friends who were institutionalized after going through it. It is an act of violence. Okay. And we are dying. And this election is life or death for us.
But the raw truth is, the money's got to come from somewhere. And it's very easy.
Let him respond.
It's very easy, and I can think of lots of things that I would like to avoid making difficult decisions on, and lots of areas like the health service or schools where I want to put even more money in. But unless you've got a strong economy, creating the revenue, it's just a childish wish list. We're trying to do our best to get the balance right between responsible public finances and investing in some of those crucial areas you discussed.
You choose to sacrifice tens of thousands of disabled people for the sake of that.
Well, I've heard the persecution of disabled and sick people called many, many things. And I've heard calls for it to be stopped and properly funded, called many things as well. But I've never heard it called a childish wish list before. Crikey. Of course, you don't have to be disabled or sick to suffer from austerity.
The typical user of food bank is not someone that's languishing in poverty, it's someone who has a cash flow problem episodically. No, it's true. Well, that is what the Trust data says.
It's not what they say, John.
It is.
He was lying when he said that that claim had come from the Trussell Trust. The Trust said that while delays to benefit payments were one of the main reasons people turned to food banks, such crises tended to be exacerbated by poverty and low pay, which were also direct causes for many to seek assistance. This came after research was published showing that there are at least 2,000 food banks in the UK. Been a bit unfair to Dominic Raab because he does actually understand some stuff. You know, all the people saying that we'll easily be able to leave the European Union and have no checks at all on the Irish border. Yeah, that stuff.
We've got a bilateral relationship with Ireland. We're a very close relationship. We've also got the history of the Troubles. All of these things can be handled very sensitively. But I think
if not, people could if Ireland obviously remains an EU member, then EU nationals can travel there and then come into the UK without a passport.
If you're worried about border controls and security, and Frontex are, if you're worried about the effect of those EU rules, you couldn't leave a back door without some kind either of checks there with any country or assurances in relation to the checks that they're conducting, obviously. Otherwise, everyone with ill will towards this country would go around that route.
But hang on a minute. How could anybody campaign for Brexit, simultaneously acknowledge that we need checks at the British border in Ireland, and also understand the objectives of the Good Friday Agreement? It's almost as if he'd never read the Good Friday Agreement. Presumably he had done so before he actually started pontificating as Secretary of State for leaving the European Union. Presumably.
Since you had such a critical role as the Brexit Secretary, I presume that in fact you had read the Belfast Agreement. Please don't line up behind the Immigration Minister and tell us that you haven't read the agreement.
I haven't sit down and started at the beginning and gone through it, but of course at various points in the negotiations, when issues have been raised, it has been an important opportunity to delve in to the different aspects very carefully.
So which aspects of so you haven't read the Belfast Agreement in its entirety?
I haven't sat down and gone from, I've used it as a reference tool.
Gosh. So, no social and economic rights. Looking after disabled and sick people is a childish wish list. People using food banks have got cash flow problems. You would need checks at the Irish border, but we should leave the European Union anyway, which suggests you haven't read the Good Friday Agreement. By the time you become Secretary of State for leaving the European Union, you're pushed into a corner where you have to admit that you hadn't, and I quote, properly, even though the words sound wrong, you've never sit down and gone through it. Crikey. Any sort of positives?
We agree to free movement of peoples.
It depends what you mean by full access to the single market. I think we would not see any trade barriers go up because we're the fifth biggest economy in the world. The European firms sell us £68 billion more in goods and services than we do them. Look at the options being put out there. Swiss, Norwegian, Turkish. I think because Britain's economy is bigger than all of those economies combined, and because the French farmers, German car manufacturers sell us £68 billion more each year than we sell them, we're very well placed, and mutual self-interest suggests we'd cut a very good deal, and it's certainly not in the Europeans' interest to erect trade barriers.
Wow. I mean, seriously now, is it possible that he could be more wrong about everything? Even if he woke up every morning and said, today I am determined to be the most wrong person in wrongland, Dominic Raab, just being Dominic Raab, would manage to be even more wrong. Presumably he accepted at the time questions and criticisms of his analysis, given that we now know his analysis was completely ridiculous.
I think there is a lot of Project Fear coming out, almost like a scare story every day. The CBI have said we'd have a high-level, ambitious free trade deal, and even the Prime Minister has said it would be scaremongering to suggest otherwise.
CBI and indeed the TUC today, of course, have described in apocalyptic terms the no deal that Raab, for reasons I'm yet to fully understand, has suddenly found himself in favour of. I'm not the only one that doesn't understand things.
We want a bespoke arrangement on goods which recognises the peculiar, frankly, geographic economic entity that is the United Kingdom. We are, and I hadn't quite understood the full extent of this, but if you look at the UK and you look at how we trade in goods, we're particularly reliant on the Dover-Calais crossing.
Well, who'd have thought it, hey? And I guess in his defence, as he said on Ian Dale's programme the other night, he is the kind of person that really speaks up for ordinary working people, except when he authored a book in 2012 which described British workers as among the worst idlers in the world.
In your usual irrational way, that you're overstating the case and being totally unrealistic.
Which bit, Paul?
Well, the case, if you're having negotiations...
I prefer to talk about...
Would you let me say what I was going to say?
When you tell me what I've been irrational about, yes.
Well, I'm just about to, if you'd let me get on with it.
Well, go on then.
Thank you. When you have negotiations, the positions can't start off fixed and then remain fixed all the way throughout, otherwise you'll never have negotiations.
How's Barnier moved?
That's right. No, I'm not. Would you just let me finish?
No, how's Barnier moved?
I would want to let me state my statement.
How has Barnier moved?
Would you let me state my statement?
Well, you've already said something that's not true.
No. You've got to allow me to develop my argument.
You carry on then, Paul. You develop away, my friend.
Are you going to allow me to finish?
Yes, Paul, carry on.
Thank you. That otherwise, so what happens is this: the UK position is that they want to preserve a free border with Ireland. That's it. If the EU are prepared to accept something like that, in other words, to modify their rules to suit the conditions of their own member state, Ireland, that might happen. If the EU show no intention of doing that, then you have to move to Plan B. And for Johnson to state what is the objective, and that is an objective which is also a public objective, and then deal with the alternatives if the EU aren't going to play ball, is just rational thinking. And I don't see how anybody can expect anybody else to do otherwise.
Well, let's begin with your first statement.
Views must change.
Yes, so let's begin with your first statement, that it's a negotiation and that means everybody moves. How has Michel Barnier's position on the Irish border changed since he first laid it out 18 months ago?
I don't think it has changed. But
you just said it has to.
Irrationality on the EU part.
No, irrationality is a description of facts.
No, what I'm saying is that they've entered...
No, I know what you're saying, Paul. I gave you lots of time to say it, and now we're examining it. So your first statement was that I had been irrational. I'm going to park my ego and not insist that you explain how.
Now, that's going to be a big job for you.
Absolutely it is. So let's look instead at what you said about negotiations. Michel Barnier's position last week and last year was that if we leave the customs union and the single market, there is no earthly way we can avoid having a hard border or moving the border to the sea. You said that positions change during negotiations. I would just give you one opportunity now to explain how his position has changed, ever.
Okay. Well, I must agree with you formally there. His position hasn't changed, which shows that they aren't proper negotiations.
No, it doesn't. It shows that his position is contractually binding. It's the nature of the Good Friday Agreement that says it cannot move.
No. Well, okay.
Well, yes, Paul, this isn't a matter of opinion. This is a matter, and I've allowed you to be rude to me, and I've allowed you to insist on talking even though you've got nothing to say, and I've allowed you to be personal. So here is the question now, okay? How do you have identical economic conditions on both sides of the Irish border?
Are you asking me?
No, Paul, I'm asking Andy Pandy.
Okay, sorry, I thought you might have dropped me in from the conversation. No, the point I'm making is
I've heard your point. The question is this: how do you have identical economic conditions on both sides of the Irish border? How do you make that happen, Paul?
Well, you have some sort of compromise whereby, as a sort that...
You can't compromise the Good Friday Agreement, Paul.
You have compromised an electronic border. It is not beyond the wit of man for the EU and the UK to agree something which suits the special conditions of Ireland.
So you've just reached for that magic wand now that says electronic border, Paul. You don't know what you're talking about.
There is a solution to it.
Go on.
And if you're saying there isn't a solution...
Tell me what the solution is.
Then are you suggesting we should not leave the EU because of the Irish border?
You tell me what the solution is, Paul.
Are you suggesting that we cannot leave the EU because of the existence of the Irish border?
I am telling you that we cannot sustain the Good Friday Agreement and Brexit in its current form without either building a border in Ireland or moving... Oh, Paul, my friend, I'm sorry.
Well, it's just going to...
You carry on talking.
You can't expect 60 million people to have their future governed by a particular agreement.
So you rang in to tell me that I was being irrational about the Irish border, and you conclude the conversation by saying, actually, you're absolutely right. It's an utterly insuperable obstacle. But it shouldn't stop us from leaving the European Union.
Because it involves some renegotiation of the Good Friday Agreement.
Yes. Have you read the Good Friday Agreement? Have you read the bit about renegotiations in the Good Friday Agreement? The bit where it says it's a holding tactic?
Let's get this straight. What you're saying to the UK public is that we cannot leave the European Union because of the existence of the Good Friday Agreement.
No, we cannot have a hard Brexit that involves leaving the customs union and the single market because of the Good Friday Agreement. There's a thing that... Let me tell you some truths. Let me tell you something simple.
James, come on, let's just follow this through.
No, Paul...
James, let's follow this through. Let's follow this through.
Right, you carry on, mate.
No, let's follow this through. You're now saying is that the EU refused to change their rules or to modify their rules to suit the special case of Ireland. And on that basis, that means that the Good Friday Agreement can't be changed. And that means because the Good Friday Agreement can't be changed, the UK cannot leave the European Union ever.
Paul, here's a wonderful thing.
Well, answer that question,
you haven't asked the question. If you did, I just said no. You said, is that what you're saying? I said no. Does that work in your head as an answer? Does that work in your head as an answer?
Well,
right, good. So now, Paul, I'm going to insist on speaking now, because here's what you've done, OK? You phoned in to say that Boris Johnson is somehow embarked upon a very sophisticated and clever negotiating process. You've ended up by acknowledging that there is no solution to the problems that the Irish border presents that would involve retaining anything that remotely resembles what we've got now. You've added to that the idea that somehow I'm suggesting we have to stay in the European Union because of Brexit, because of the Irish border, which is simply not true. And the only question I have for you is this: how do you have identical economic conditions on both sides of the Irish border? After Paul, you have to listen to me, because otherwise you just make all these weird noises and none of us ever learn anything. The simple instruction is this: identical economic conditions on both sides of the Irish border. One side is in the customs union and the single market, one side is in neither. Now make that work, Paul.
No doubt that there can be arrangements which will allow a very special circumstance of those 2 million people in the north of Ireland to be settled.
Describe them, Paul. Describe them.
It's whether people are willing to do it or not.
Describe them.
Well, that it's a technical issue.
Well, describe it. I'm clever. I can keep up. Describe the circumstances in which you can make that work, Paul.
Because I don't have to go through all the details of it.
I don't want all the details, Paul. I want one detail.
You can have an electronic border. You can have the trade.
What does that mean? What does that mean, Paul?
You can have it done electronically with a minimum.
How does an electronic border? How does an electronic border test? Paul, how does an electronic border test the milk to see whether or not it's infected or not? How does an electronic border count the amount of barrels in the back of a lorry? How does an electronic border know whether I've got guns in my boot?
Milk isn't infected. You don't have to test all the milk all the time. Not all products coming from abroad, not everything is tested all the time. Not every sample is tested.
I've done my best.
Sample is tested.
No, because there's no border there now. Paul, everything I've said is true.
No, it's not. You're making it up. You're putting extreme positions, unyielding positions.
All right, let me ask you again, Paul, how is the border? How are we going to have identical economic conditions on both sides of the Irish border?
But they won't
when
be
one side is in the customs union.
They will be compatible. That's all you have to have is compatibility. Some degree of compromise. Of course you can do it.
And it's a question of belief. You're absolutely certain it can be done, but you have no idea
and the will
how.
to do it. Of course it can be done.
How?
Well, I've just told you. You have it as even as
so we're going for electronic borders.
You have.
I'm going to give you 5 minutes now. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to
people to do certain things.
5 minutes to describe the electronic border. Go on.
You just let them get on with it.
Mate.
I'm sorry. You're inventing the difficulties because
I'm inventing the difficulties that Boris Johnson described as unthinkable economic and political madness.
Of course, no. That was because that is the UK negotiating. Because that's what they want the EU to agree to. But the EU are not yielding on it. Therefore, we have to move to Plan B.
What's Plan B again?
Well, Plan B is some form of electronic border.
Okay, let's just agree on that. The electronic border is the new unicorn. Am I right?
Well, one second.
Yes, it's 10:48. Bill's in Exmouth. Bill, what would you like to say?
Actually, James, I owe you an apology, my dear fellow. I was wrong.
Go on.
I was wrong, and I think you're absolutely right. I think that I'm an old-fashioned git, really, I suppose.
We've spoken before.
Yeah, we've spoken before.
Yeah.
And you know what? You are right. I was wrong. For some reason,
Go on.
I thought we were better off, and clearly I was wrong.
Well, don't beat yourself up, Bill, mate. Listen to all the people that told you we would be. I've spent the whole morning telling they've been whispering in your ear, not just for 2.5 years, for 30 years.
I was wrong. I am so sorry.
Oh, Bill, mate, come on.
What have I done to my country? I'm so sorry.
Bill, there's 17.4 million people. You can't take all the blame on your own shoulders, my friend. Come on. And look at the effort. These people are billionaires. They own the Ritz, Bill. They own the Daily Telegraph. They wouldn't have spent all that money and put all that effort into trying to persuade you to act against your own interests if they didn't think it was plausible. I'm not going to let you blame yourself, Bill. All right? No. Blame them, Bill. Blame them, Bill. Do not blame yourself.
I'm sorry, James.
Don't be sorry. Be angry, all right? And if you're not angry yet, I'll get angry on your behalf. That right there. That's why I've been doing what I've been doing for the last 2.5 years. Philip is in Sandbach in Cheshire. Philip, is that what happened yesterday?
Hello. Actually, I think you're distorting the whole issue of Brexit. We, the electorate, were asked by MPs for a very clear instruction.
I have been over this quite a few times. Can we confine ourselves to what happened in the House of Commons yesterday?
Yes, I think basically those Conservative MPs who are rebelling are traitors. They are betraying.
But they're just asking for the right to vote on something in the event that it's appalling.
No, not at all.
No, what is it then?
They received a very clear mandate.
No, I appreciate that, but we're talking about what happened yesterday, very, very specifically. Here's what I think, Philip, and then you can pick it apart, okay? But let's deal in the specifics. They have posited the notion, and we will keep it theoretical for the purposes of our conversation. They've posited the notion that the Prime Minister is not going to be able to conjure up anything that isn't demonstrably and considerably inferior to our current arrangements. If that becomes clear, they want the right to say, whoa, stop it. And the government or the parliamentary majority and people like you don't want them to have the right to put the brakes on if it becomes absolutely obvious that we're driving into a brick wall. Now, what's wrong with that analysis, do you think?
Yes, because the alternative they're suggesting would keep us in the EU by the back door.
No, but that's not what happened I'm talking very specifically about what happened in the House of Commons yesterday. They say we must have the right to apply the brake if it becomes absolutely obvious that we're driving into a burning building. And you say, no, even if we're driving into a burning building, we must not have a brake.
Yes, I agree, because...
Yeah, I thought you might, actually. Yes.
If the Prime Minister can't...
You did hear the words that came out of my mouth. I said, if we're driving into a burning building, Philip in Sandbach doesn't want us to not only apply the brake, he doesn't want us to even have a brake.
If Brexit means falling off a cliff edge, so be it.
I salute your honesty, Philip. I salute your honesty.
That's what we voted for.
Absolutely. We voted to fall off a cliff edge and to drive into a burning building.
We did indeed.
No, you're right, we did. Is there any way we can prove that you rang in of your own volition, that you're not an actor, that you haven't been put up to this? Because I'm now going to get bombarded with emails saying... oh, carefully handpicked and filtered from all the cowards who haven't got the guts to ring in themselves. Can we prove that you're real?
Yes.
How?
I'm actually a Brexiteer.
Well, I know that, Philip, because I speak to people like you every day, but other people aren't quite as honest as you are, and they still think that there's an intelligent analysis of the stuff you've just said.
I stood for UKIP 4 times
there you
as
go.
a candidate.
You see?
I'm an ex-UKIPper.
Bingo. The real deal. What did you vote for? We voted for pain and oblivion. And just talk me through the positives, the things that when I put on the scales that we're going to be poorer, that we're not going to be able to trade with the largest single market in the world, that we're going to be damaged. The outgoing head of the CBI says that large parts of the car industry today are going to go extinct if we don't stay in the customs union. So I put all that on the scales on this side, all the measurable materials.
You haven't mentioned immigration.
Exactly that. So you put on the other side the stuff that really makes it all worthwhile. Go.
Immigration is the greatest threat that's faced us since the Second World War.
It is,
mass immigration.
Absolutely.
Mass immigration leads to third world ghettos.
It does, yes.
And that's creating the enemy within.
Right, you are.
That's why.
Yes.
That's why we voted to leave.
It is, yes.
It was a clear
Ghettos and the enemy within. Yes.
And
So
that's what
you're talking about ghettos of continental European people, like sort of Little Venice.
Because the open door to Europe is also an open door to the rest of the world.
But it isn't, though, is it?
What do you mean it isn't? We've had 20,000 Somalis come to Britain via the Netherlands.
Right. And how many of them are in Sandbach?
Oh, Sandbach is 98% white British.
Well, I suppose.
So my neighbourhood, fortunately, hasn't yet been affected.
No.
But around the southeast,
yes,
what you have essentially are
cesspits.
Third world cultures.
Do you know where? Because I'd quite like to go. I live in the southeast. Do you know where they are?
London is the worst example, obviously.
But I'm actually in the middle of London at the moment, and you're in Sandbach, and you're telling me that what I can see out of my own window is what is it, an illusion?
In most London boroughs.
Well, go on, talk me through which ones.
In most London boroughs.
Well, go on, talk me through which ones have you been to?
Like Lambeth, etc.
Lambeth?
etc.
Where the Archbishop of Canterbury lives?
Whites are actually in a minority.
In a minority.
In a minority. That's a great threat to social stability and
it is, but you know that the European Union contains no countries that are not majority white.
That's not the point. That's not the point.
What is the point?
The point is where you've got these large immigrant ghettos who are living
like in Lambeth,
within their own cultures, within their own cultures
of French people and Italians and Spanish
moral framework. We end up with social with chaos,
right,
and a lack of social cohesion.
We do a lack of social cohesion. What does cohesion mean, Philip?
It means neighbourhoods coming together and communities coming together.
As long as they're not brown.
Subscribing. I happen to be an East African Asian myself.
Of course you do, Philip. Of course you do. And do you live in a ghetto?
No, I've chosen to live in a town that's 98% white British.
Right, you are. And are you the enemy within?
I'm an assimilationist.
Can you prove that you're not the enemy within, Philip?
A few of us, James.
Prove it, Philip.
To assimilate.
A few of us have chosen to assimilate. And there you have it. Just for the record, you are 100% real, Philip. And you've rang up entirely of your own volition, and you're not an actor or a stooge or anything like that. You're a 4-time UKIP candidate. Am I right or am I right?
I stood 4 times for UKIP. I'm no longer a member. I'm an ex-UKIPper.
Okay, mate.
I stood 4 times for UKIP.
Have a great day. It's 21 minutes after 10. So when the vote is lost tonight by the Prime Minister, and we go back to Brussels and ask them to do what they've said in very clear terms they're not prepared to do, what happens then?
Well, there's then a choice for the European Union, as much as there is for us, whether we leave with a different deal or whether we leave without one, because that's what the law provides for.
Sorry, say that again. The European Union get to decide what happens to us?
No, there's a choice for both of us.
Oh, so that's not what you said?
No, I said there's a choice for both of us.
Carry on.
Either we have a new deal, which both sides are then willing to accept, or we leave without a deal on the
So that's the option now. The European Union, if they're telling the truth when they say that we're not going to renegotiate anything, we leave without a deal.
But this is a negotiation, so when people say this is our bottom line, it very rarely is. But time will tell.
So how much time have we got?
We've got, 73 days?
Yes, and so you think in the next 73 days the European Union are going to change the negotiating position that has been more or less constant for the last 12 months?
In reality, I think it's more likely that we leave without an agreement and leave on WTO terms. Okay. So that goes back to what we were discussing before.
It does. So you're advocating for no deal. That's what you believe is the most likely outcome.
It's what one believes is most likely and what one is advocating for are not necessarily the same thing.
So what is one advocating for?
I would be in favour of a deal But if that proves impossible, there is nothing to be fearful about leaving on WTO terms.
Okay, and all the people that say there's a lot to be fearful of, like the National Farmers Union and the Governor of the Bank of England and the CBI, you can see what they can't see, which is...
Well, the CBI's got everything wrong in its history. It wanted us to join the euro, wanted us to join the exchange rate mechanism.
I think that's what you just called a red herring or something, isn't it? So the question is, what can you see that they can't see?
What I would say is that you should judge people by their previous track records.
Well, I am. Why haven't you taken down that tweet from The Sun about what tariffs really means? Because The Sun withdrew it and it's still on your Twitter account, so I'm judging you by your track record.
Right. Judge away. The Governor of the Bank of England said we'd have a technical recession. Thank you so much. Fortunately, you're not a part of the judiciary. The Governor of the Bank of England said we would have a technical recession purely on a vote to leave.
The question is, what can you see that they can't see? And you know that the Governor, I mean, this is so disingenuous. The Governor of the Bank of England dedicated himself on the morning after the vote to making his own predictions not come true. But you know this. You just know that if you say it in a plausible and persuasive fashion, people will continue to believe you, despite the fact that you've led them to the precipice of a no-deal Brexit, which even you know deep down will be disastrous. Unless you can answer this question. What is it you can see that they can't?
You're trying to get up to the adverts with an hysterical diatribe. I think
it's all right. We can postpone the adverts. What can you see that all of the people who warn against coming out with no deal can't see?
I can see what they've got wrong before and why.
I'm not asking about the past. I'm asking about the future. What can you see that they can't see?
The past is a very useful guide to the future because you can see why people are making the judgments. The CBI protects incumbent interests, and therefore it always goes for things that are not for the consumer interest but the producer interest.
Yes, okay.
The Governor of the Bank of England is a deeply politicised figure who has been anti-Brexit from the moment it was proposed. What can I see? I can see the opportunities of cheaper food, clothing and footwear, helping most of all the incomes of the least well-off in our society.
Absolutely nobody agrees with you.
We can cut tariffs, we can reduce costs to people.
Absolutely nobody agrees with you.
Even the Sun
newspaper withdrew these claims.
Exciting. It's a great opportunity. It is freedom for the British people. It is no longer shackled to the failed economic model of the European Union, which has the euro and high unemployment and even Germany going into recession. It is a wonderful opportunity for our nation. You should rejoice and be proud at what our country can do.
I was hoping to have reasons for rejoicing at the end of this conversation, so I'll ask you one final time. The economic modelling that you rely upon has been discredited so badly that even the Sun withdrew it. Why do you persist?
That's not true. The advice I take is from economists for free trade and Patrick Minford, who has the best track record of almost any forecaster you can find in this country, and that cutting tariffs does cut prices. That's unquestionably true.
Patrick Minford, let me just write that down. Patrick Minford has the best reputation for economic forecasting.
He got the exchange rate mechanism right, he got the euro right. His record in this field
Gordon Brown got the euro right. So Jacob Rees-Mogg is the gentleman that said, for Brexit to succeed, agriculture and industry will be decimated in this country.
Won't be decimated
but he said that, and he's the man you're citing.
That actually it will be an opportunity for us to be more competitive.
We need to be clear. He's the man you're citing, and those are his words.
You're taking one very selective quotation from him. He's actually saying that it's a real economic opportunity.
Did he or did he not say that?
And we'll get fast economic growth.
Did he not say that manufacturing industry and agriculture would be more or less destroyed?
You've got to put what he said in the full context of the economic growth that we will.
Did he or did he not say that agriculture and industry would be destroyed?
I think, as I refer you to the answer I've just given,
well, I'd like a yes or a no. Did he or did he not say it?
You might like all sorts of things, but
did he or did he not say it?
You're quoting extraordinarily selectively from somebody who has forecast.
So he said it.
He has forecast correctly on the exchange rate mechanism, on the euro, and the opportunities that come from cutting the barriers to trade, which have worked in every country.
Your favourite economic forecaster explained that agriculture and industry would be destroyed by Brexit.
You're completely exaggerating a comment that he made.
So he did say it. So he did say it.
What you're saying is inaccurate. Okay. You're trying to spin something when he points to. It is indeed, yes. It's your reputation.
Absolutely.
But it's a fine one, and it makes good listening.
Yes. So you're not going to answer the question.
I've answered many of your questions.
You have, but here's the last one. Did Patrick Minford, your economic forecaster of choice?
I've already answered that one. I've told you
so he did say
your doing the classic thing of taking something selectively and out of context to make a wrong point.
Okay, so did he say it or not?
I've just answered your question. I refer you to what I said a moment ago.
Well, just remind my listeners, did he say it or not?
They were paying more attention than you.
I heard you say that he'd been quoted, which would suggest he did say it, but you haven't answered my question except obliquely. So the man that you cite as an economic forecaster to be trusted...
You're so classically inaccurate. I've answered your question merely not in the way...
I'm very grateful for your time.
You wanted me to.
Well, no, I asked a question that admits a yes or no answer, and you haven't provided a yes or no answer, so we can at least end on a tone of agreement. You didn't answer the question in the way that I wanted to. And we both know why.
I live in Harrow.
Yeah.
When I go down to Harrow, and this is not being racist, James, because that term is so easily used and very loosely used. When I go down to Harrow, and I've lived here for 30 years, I walk into Harrow Shopping Centre, and I swear to God, I don't know where I am. I've got Polish, Romanians, Bulgarians sitting outside coffee houses doing sod all day. I've got every nationality under the sun, and it's lost its identity. When I go into Norfolk Park Hospital, and I went in there 3 Sundays ago because I had to go in an emergency, I walked into the accident emergency, as I said to your researcher, 120 people in there. I was lucky if I saw 3 or 4 white faces. It's okay if you live...
Now that is racist.
No,
that last bit is.
It's realistic.
No, it isn't, because you're forming an opinion of people or their value based on their colour. There are people who don't have white faces who are just as British as you and me, Steve.
Perhaps there are, James, but if...
Well, no, they all are.
You go down
and that's... name me the European Union... Steve, mate, let's not do this. Let's do it nicely. Just tell me the European Union country that is populated by non-white people.
Couldn't tell you.
Well, have a go. Have a little think.
Say the question again?
The European Union countries, because we're talking about your reasons for leaving the European Union, and then you mentioned the fact that there weren't any white people in Northwick Park Hospital. So which European Union countries are essentially non-white?
Probably none.
So why are you talking about those people then?
All right. Let's backtrack.
Yeah, let's, mate. I'm happy to let you do that.
No, let's backtrack. But it is still a valid point, James.
Not in the context of a conversation about the European Union, Steve.
Yeah,
and I'm afraid that if you are judging people according to their skin colour, then you are, and I say this with love and reluctance, then you are indulging in racial prejudice.
But James is.
So I don't care what colour you are. Yeah, I'm never going to say to Beth at the end of the programme we had too many black people on today, or we had too many white people on today.
But it's not all about. White people, white English people. We're going off tangent.
No, you did, mate. I'm just reining you back in again. So crack on.
It's not all about the racist issue. It's just about the fact that the country has lost its identity.
What does that mean?
Well, what does it mean? It means that what I've just said, that
you've just said that you don't like seeing brown faces at the hospital.
Okay, no. Is it right then, James? Let's give another example. Right, I might be digging myself a big hole, but
I'll pull you out, mate. I promise.
Right. But the point I'm trying to make, if you went down to my local, and I'll give you an absolute point here. If you went down to my local supermarket, I won't name which one it is. Okay?
Yeah.
And one of my sons tried to get a job down, or 2 of my sons tried to get a job down there in a few years when they were in between university and going from college to university. At one point, James, there was 23 tills open, and 22 of them, okay,
yes, mate,
had Indians or Pakistani people.
But we're talking about the European Union, Steve.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say, James, is this is where it's all coming from. And when I mentioned this to the manager, okay, the manager said to me, we have to reflect the local community. And the point I'm trying to make, James, and you're trying to, to a degree, defend me, but to attack me, is that right, James?
Mate,
that is why people have voted out of Europe.
Because we've got too many brown people on the tills in Harrow.
It's not about having too many, but when I was
what is it then, Steve? Just mate, slow down a little bit. Because if you're not complaining about there being too many brown people, why do you keep talking about the number of brown people in the hospital and the number of brown people in the supermarket?
The reason I'm saying that is, James, is because that is why people voted to leave Europe, because of Great Britain.
I don't disagree with you. No, it's not because of Great Britain losing its identity. It's because people are frightened of brown people.
No, it's not about it. No, James.
What difference does it make to me? Just help me out here, because I can kind of get my... Just because I work on the phones every day, so I have no idea what colour anybody is. I could... Steve, stop talking. Stop talking just for a moment, my friend, all right? Why does it matter to you what colour the person that you buy your milk off is?
Well, it doesn't matter the colour that I buy, the person I buy my milk off, James, but what the point I'm trying to make is why people voted out of Europe.
I'm not arguing with you. They voted out of Europe because they think there's too many brown people in their hometowns.
Is it unfair then, James, to say that when I mention what I said about the local supermarket, that
and the hospital,
when I'm told, and the hospital, but let's go to the supermarket. When I'm told that we have to reflect the local community, is that not racist, James?
No, Steve.